Do you want to start making art, but maybe you don't believe that you have the skills or the creativity to make that start? Let me show you a simple method that will help you take that first step. You just need to be able to draw three simple shapes: a circle, a triangle, a square, and some roughly straight lines. In the first video in the series, I showed you how I'd applied this in 3 stages to a still life. The previous 2 videos I've looked at landscape and a streetscape. In this video, I'm going to apply this simplified method to what's probably one of the most challenging subjects, and that's a self-portrait study. I hope it also makes a reasonable likeness too. You can let me know in the comments what you think. With any kind of portrait stuff, then proportions are much more important. So although we're going to be breaking this down into some simple shapes, and I'll show you a little tip to help with that, it's important also to do a bit more measuring to try and get the proportions more or less right. Even for a first study, I think this is a good practice to do. So what I've done here is I've put a bit of a border on the photo that I printed out. I've done it so that the long edge is 1.5 times the length of this edge. Okay, so I've done the same thing here so that this side here is 1.5 times. And then I'm looking at a few guidelines, and one line I'm looking at is the cross between the line of the eyes and the line down the center of the face. And because the head's slightly turned, then the line isn't going to be dead center, it's going to be slightly off. So the points I'm looking at are the bridge of the nose, the middle of the top lip, and then this bit, middle of the bottom lip and the middle of the chin, to join those. And that'll be different from the end of the nose, which is slightly off because obviously my nose is sticking out a wee bit further than a straight line down the flat part of the face. So these are some dots we can join. And again, this line here won't be exactly in the center of the head here because the whole head's turned slightly. And you can get an idea of this just by laying thing like a straight edge along like that. You can see there's a tilt. So we want to get a similar kind of tilt here in this one. And I've already started to lay out some of these basic lines here. Now, a little tip to help to maybe visualize this more easily before going on to your paper. If you can get some tracing paper and lay it over the top here, like I did here earlier, you can see that I've gone over it and I've just put on some of these lines. So I've found these points here. So notice not on the nose itself, but on the bridge of the nose, just underneath the nose, middle of the bottom lip, and then the middle of the chin. And that makes a straight line that goes through like this, and then you've got another line going across for the eyes. And the eyes, there's a slight slant to the eyes, so I've also added a little bit of a line here. But the basic guideline is this cross. I've got this cross shape. The next thing I'm going to look at is this circle. If you continue the circle around, it would kind of go along here, kind of just underneath, probably just underneath the nose, through that point. Okay, so the nose is just above here. Coming from this central point then, we can put a sort of rectangular shape going down the nose, and it goes slightly off from there. And it's a fairly thin rectangle down the bridge of the nose here. Obviously this will vary a bit depending on the shape of your nose. From the outside of the eyes here, just inside that circle, you can also see a sort of triangular shape that I've drawn on here. That follows the structure of the face down out just beyond the corner of the eyes. So if we take it just inside the circle, and it's going down to the tip of the chin, so round about here, just constructing it. The more the head's turned around, the more asymmetrical this will be. So there's a bit more on this side than there is. The triangle is a little bit offset. over here. And then there's a sort of a circle here for the end of the chin. The line of the jaw in my case is quite square. Again, you can see a sort of tilted square shape. And the sides of that square, it is more or less a square, so then there's a sort of triangular line here down the nose, again just making contact with this circle, so gradually building this up. There's also a bit of a line down this way. You can see some of the lines in my face, also joining some of these points together almost down to the corner of this sort of square, so it's slightly curved, so I can just let my hand curve it a bit, and again the same on this side. So we're kind of building up a framework which we can use. There's a natural triangular shape here. We'll see it with the shadow. Okay, you can see that drawn in on this. So coming off this bottom side of the square, a sort of triangle shape, again to the point of the chin, so that's a useful reference point. Okay, so we're beginning to get there. Now, if this is the line of the eyes here, you can see that because my face is a bit screwed up there, blinking into the light, then we've got a bit of an angle here. Now the gap between the eyes is usually about the same as the actual width of the eye itself. And then normally if you're looking straight on at somebody, there's almost the same again between here and the edge of the head. So you can sort of divide it roughly into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so if the eye comes to about here, corner of the eyes, and then you've got a gap of about the same as the eye itself over there. And if you look more closely, and you'll start to see a bit of this sort of shape. So although we're starting off with some of these simple shapes, now we're looking more at a few lines that just get this. If you remember the video on ellipses, if you've seen that one, you could fit a sort of ellipse into here. We've got these roughly triangular planes on the top of the cheeks. And the nose itself, again, we've got several guides here for the nose. The nose seems to be part of this circle that you can fit into here. So that's a useful guide. And there are smaller circles that you can find to make the forms here. Circles here as well around the nostrils. Kind of just showing slightly flattened circle to make the form for that. And then get some of these lines in here. A little, it's not quite on the line from the edge of the nostril, it's a wee bit further back. So if you drew a line down to here, it's slightly further back. You could almost draw another circle, or a sort of squashed circle here, going into the center of the chin, up through the middle of the nose. So this is a slightly different, you'll see the way this is developing. It's slightly, I'm taking slightly longer about this than for the previous ones. Now between the bottom of the nose and the middle, that middle bit under the lower lip, roughly halfway you've got the mouth. So about here. And you see that the line of the mouth is above the corners of the jaw. So, and you can see it makes a sort of curve here. So although we've got a starting line here, we can make that a slight curve without making it a silly grin. It almost goes, it doesn't go out to these very corners, but it almost goes out to maybe a slightly smaller circle that's here. So again, sketching in a light circle here. And we're starting to build up the planes of a face. And then there might, depending on your lips, again, there might be a little bit of a line about there. Now we can also round off the bottom of that triangle there. We've got to work carefully from observation. So it's not actually a perfect square, it's quite a sort of rounded edge to the jaw here. So we can, just letting the pencil swing like this, let things go like that. And again, here. Now here, that's a little turned away, so it's actually a smoother curve along this bit, which you can see here. There is a sort of triangle shape that we've got here. But now we're going to smooth that off. Like this. And then you can see there's a bit of a fold there. As I'm not getting younger. So that forms part of another line from about here all the way through down to that, cutting off that corner, if you like. So it's kind of slightly curving, making this like a sort of curved triangle down to about there. And there's another bit of a fold. And again down to here, down to the circle of the chin. Okay, and then we've got these shadows here, which we can mark in a little more strongly. This one, you can see that that's quite a soft shadow. So we'll just mark in the strongest bits just there. We can just put in the lines of the eyebrows. They're just slightly above the arms of the cross that we marked in. So look, if we just get that in position again. So this is where the tracing paper construction sheet can be useful. You can see the eyebrows are just slightly above that. So we've got the arms of this cross here. We've got the eyebrows. Guess we'll go up and in a little bit without making them look too exaggerated. Now for the ears, constructing is basically with a triangle and then just taking the top off the triangle here. Again, this one slightly out of sight, a truncated triangle. So top of the ear is about here, and this line of this is going down towards this corner here. So. Then there's the shadow on the inside. And you can see another bit of structure in there. You may want to just leave them very simple. Ears can be tricky. They're very individual. See, that one is almost just a little curved shadow, so we can leave it at that. now I'm just going around strengthening some of these edges. And I'm going to go over this with a pen afterwards. Now the hair, you can be a little bit more freeform with this one, as you can see in the tracing. I've just sort of stylized it a bit, so first of all I'll just put in some block type shapes, so it's a sort of rough rectangle here. My hair was pretty mussed up this day because I was out in the wind on a mountain, so I can maybe stylize it a bit. And because of this style of drawing, it might be quite good to simplify the hair quite a bit and give it a bit of character, a bit more character than it really had at the time. Then the neck, of course, comes down like this. Again, looking at the photograph, got one bit there, you can't really see the other side, but you can kind of guess this bit. So we can put this in as more of a rectangle here, and it's got a nice sort of triangular bit coming down like this, and then this goes up to meet the jawline there. And then now we can be a little bit more freeform, and then there's the shoulder coming out that way. So you can see, using this approach of trying to break the face into shape. So we're kind of gradually moving away from the very, very simple shapes that we used in the first video and in the earlier landscape video, now to shapes that really reflect more of what we can actually see. Okay, so we're just going to build up the nose a wee bit here. And then there's a number of ways we can treat this. We could keep it very geometric, or we could kind of make it a little more realistic, putting slightly heavier lines where there's a slightly stronger shadow as a bit of a guide. And I might put some lines in here. Okay, I'm not worried about my age, so I'm just going to show a bit of this. Just choosing a few lines out of here. After all, they're all lines of experience. You can add the shadows in if you want to. I'm going to leave those out for the moment, but I'm going to just put in where there's a slightly stronger shadow. And I think that's ready to go to the next stage. In this first version of this study, I made a bit of a mistake on the proportions and elongated the bottom of the face a wee bit too much. It's quite a common mistake to make. So I repeated it using a set of compasses to do the measurements for a bit more accuracy. Again, I used the tracing paper, but this time I scaled the drawing up on the tracing paper, scaled it up about 2 times. So for each measurement on the original drawing, I went twice as far on the scaled up version. The useful thing with this is that it gives me a handy resource to use if I want to repeat this exercise and try some different styles, or just try working on any areas that I want to improve on. Then I was able to easily transfer it to the paper and lay down the pencil lines as I showed earlier on, and now I was ready to put ink onto the lines. I'd like to have used a slightly thicker nib, but this is what I had available. It's a calligraphy pen with some waterproof ink, which will allow me to add a wash over the top if I want to. I could also have used a brush for a bit more expressive lines, and with a little more time I'd probably have a go at doing that, because you get a nice interesting variety of line thicknesses and effects, and you could try maybe a freer approach. Anyway, this is what I decided to start with, and I just chose the main key lines in the whole thing. I didn't want to add too many, because it's easy with an ink pen to make a face look too harshly lined. So I was quite choosy about the lines that I put in. I didn't really put any shadows in with the ink pen. I just indicated with slightly thicker lines where some of the key shadows would be, but I left that for the colouring stage. Once I'd laid this out and allowed the ink to dry thoroughly, then I was able to erase the pencil lines, and then it was ready to add some colour. I'm going to use these pencils. I was using this nice set of coloured pencils for this. They're a good quality set, they're not too expensive. And the nice thing with these better quality pencils, compared to the very cheap ones which you've seen me use in a previous video, is that the pigment quality and loading in the pencil leads is somewhat better, and it allows you more easily to layer colours over each other to get blends. So here I'm using each of the colours very lightly just to build up a nice blend to try to match the original picture reasonably well, but not exactly. When I was looking at some of the shaded areas, especially those bits which might be catching a bit of reflected light from the surroundings, I was standing in quite brightly lit, very bright snow, and you sometimes get a bit of quite a blue reflection of snow from the light from the sky itself. So there are hints of blues and purples in some of the shaded areas, and I wanted to add those. They're quite subtle, and I don't know whether they really show up very well on the video, but I wanted to practice adding those in, as you could see them in the original photograph. It's up to you really, with this kind of approach, how you decide to finish it off. And you've got the option to take it in any direction stylistically, so I could have made it a lot more maybe cartoony or abstracted. You can do whatever you like. And the nice thing with having a tracing that you can go back to repeat it is you could do an experiment with a whole load of different styles and just see which one you like best. My intention with this series of videos has been to help you take that first step over the start line. That's often the hardest step to take. Armed with very basic drawing skills, you can produce something which is intentional, aesthetically pleasing, based in reality and observation, and which I hope you can feel proud of. Now, I appreciate that this may not be the style in which you want to end up working, the kind of art you want to finish up producing, and that's fine. You're on a journey. Which way you go now depends entirely on you, the choices that you make. So what next? Here's 3 tips for you. First, I encourage you to practice regularly. In fact, it's really good to get a sketchbook and try to make drawing a habit. I say more about that in another video, which I'll link at the end of this one. Look at other artists' work, as many as you can get to see. Go to exhibitions, look at pictures, look on the internet, have a really good browse around. Don't be afraid to look at artists whose work that you like and that you dislike. You can learn valuable lessons from both. Some good questions to ask yourself include, What is it that's drawn me to this piece of work? Or what is it that I'm reacting to strongly in this work? Embrace imperfection in your artwork. Remember, drawing is not photography. A bit of imperfection, a few wonky lines and that kind of thing, those all help to bring life and character to your work. They help to make it individual. When you're reviewing something that you've produced, don't be too hard on yourself. You can be critical and constructive, but without punishing yourself. Whatever you've done at this stage, it's part of a journey. It's another step that you've made, and you can continue to learn from that. Identify what are the things that have gone well, and what would you like to improve? What would you do differently next time? That helps you to get clarity about the specific learning objectives that you can set yourself, and also then what to do about them. Whether you need to go on a course, practice more, study a wider range of artists, or maybe find other ways to explore techniques and different media and different approaches. Let me know in the comments how you're getting on with this. I'd love to hear about your progress. To see more about sketchbooks, I've got a video linked here for that, and I say a bit more about some of the barriers that can get in the way of getting started with art over here. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you in one of the other videos.